This is the Under the Ring Report. Here are your hosts, John the Flesh Wound and Cousin Tom, making wrestling great again in their own minds.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Under the Ring Report. My co-host, as usual, Cousin Tom. Welcome.
Hey. What's going on this week?
You know what? It's going to be another flashback week.
All right.
Now, this man, probably one of the great managers of all time, General Skandor Akbar. A lot of people will remember that name because he had a very heavy influence with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And back in 1999, I had the pleasure of interviewing him. So this week, we will go back and listen to an interview with the late, great General Skandor Akbar here on the Under the Ring Report.
With us, General Skandor Akbar. Welcome to the Under the Ring Report.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
The list of people you've wrestled with and trained is very impressive. I mean, guys that are right in the business right now, you know, Mick Foley's, The Undertaker's, Steve Austin's. You've had stuff to do with all these guys.
Yes, that's true. Yes, it is. You know, of course, when I formed Devastation Incorporated, more or less, you know, I moved from the squared circle as far as the wrestling part, and just all I do is wrestle at the you know, the right time and opportunities. And during that time, it goes back to Kamala, the one-man gang, the missing link, Killer Khan, the list goes on. And in later years, as you said, Mick Foley, even Steve Austin, he started around here. And, of course, Mark Calloway, the Undertaker. You know, he was a great card here. Well, we had just was bringing him along, and we had a mask on him at that time. We called him the Punisher, and he reminded me so much of the spoiler Don Jardine, and the way that he handled himself in that squared circle. So the rest is history. So, and he's done very, very well, and I'm so very proud. Yes. That they've gone on and carried this torch and became superstars in professional wrestling.
Now as being mostly involved in the Texas wrestling action, they're kind of compare it to the other areas. It just seems like Texas has always been a hotbed for bringing up the talent. I mean, you've got the Von Erich. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on of who's come up from that area and just gone on to become megastars.
Yes, true. Texas, of course, the Von Erichs were the franchise here. And I like to call them the Dragons and the Dragon Slayers. In other words, you know, they were the Dragon Slayers. You keep feeding them the lions and the dragons like Devastation Incorporated, and they were over so big here that just the name Von Erich was. I mean, it would constitute a tremendous house anywheres. And of course, we all know about the tragedy in the family. Kevin's the only one that's living with us now, and but the people still remember here. Yes, World Class had a tremendous following, as Mid-South did also. And I, of course, I was in the thick of both of those organizations at that time.
Now, you actually, which Von Erich was it? I read somewhere where it's like one of the great matches with one of the Von Erichs when you were still wrestling.
Yes, I did what I did, and I challenged Mike Von Erich for his first match. And I believe that's probably where it came out, that I would challenge him during his first match, and that was at Reunion Arena in 1983. I believe it was Thanksgiving, and of course we sold out Reunion countless times in those days. So it was an open challenge to young Mike Von Erich, and I told him that I would baptize him like his father never could. So anyway, but you know, I've had you know, they were on the other side of the fence, of course, and all of the people like Killer Khan and the one-man gang. We had some wars with the Von Erichs, and we had wars with Brody. And I might say something about Brody too. Doug's Gym, which is a real famous, I started to say infamous, but it's not. It's a famous gym in downtown Dallas, and we found Brody there working out. And he was a sports writer. This is the early 70s.
Really?
Yes. Isn't he? Of course, you know his name was Frank Goodish.
Yes.
And Doug had called me, and he had said that there's a guy here that's going to be a natural for wrestling. So I went up there to meet him, and of course, down here in Dallas, they gave him a couple of starts. Then we brought him over to Louisiana, and teamed him up with, guess who, Stan Hansen.
Wow.
And both of them were so green it looked like mowing the lawn. but they made up for it in their charisma and how they worked in that squared circle.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the rest of that is history.
Oh, definitely.
So there's a lot of history and a lot of wrestlers that have started here. It's like it's like a birthplace here in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And Texas, I would say Texas and Louisiana, and I'd say Arkansas runs a third straight as far as being in this area are the tops in wrestling. People just love it, and they still do.
Yes. Well, I mean, as we look up to what's going on now, we've got the two
Absolutely.
big companies.
Yes.
What do you prefer? I mean, because you've been there.
John, let me say this. I do not wish to demean the WWF or the WCW.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends. As a matter of fact, I gave Jim Ross one of his first opportunities as an announcer when I was booking for Leroy McGurk in the late 70s for a time.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of good friends there. The same thing pertains to Atlanta. So what I'm saying is I'm not stepping on their toes. It's just the sign of the times.
Yeah.
And, John, quite frankly, I really don't agree with a lot of things they do, but that's not to say that when I train somebody, and as I've said before, I'm very, very proud of what some of these young men have done. But I do not approve of a lot of the things they do in the two organizations. Mm-hmm. And, of course, they are catering, and what it is TV ratings. I'm sure that's what it is, and as I've said, in the old TV format, we always gave everybody 42 minutes of wrestling, and now you're lucky to get 10 or 15. The rest of it's the interviews or the rehashing of what's coming up on the pay-per-view.
Yes.
In essence, what they're showing you is what you're seeing is really not the greatest thing in the world. Wait for the pay-per-view, and that's what it's and that's what it's all. That's what it's built up to be.
That's true, and I mean that's I don't know. I mean, some people may like that, but the people that can't afford the pay-per-views, I mean. That's
exactly right, and they don't come to the small towns. As I've said before, there's a lot of things that I really don't agree with, but. Mm-hmm. I'm very, very proud of what they've done. And you have to give McMahon credit. He took his father's organization.
Well, he's reinvented wrestling.
Yes, he has. And he took it to the what really made him was taking it to that second level in marketing. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll agree on that.
Definitely. I mean,
See, he did the marketing, and in those days when we had territories, so to speak, they didn't do the dolls, and we could have sold hundreds of them. But the thing about it was, when somebody left to another territory, if he didn't have it in writing, he was afraid he wouldn't get this money, and the promoters didn't want to mess with it. All they did was sell pictures. Mm-hmm. And McMahon was smart enough to do that. And of course, you've got to take your hat off to him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he pretty much started signing guys though to work strictly for his company too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Instead of, because I know for a long time it was a guy could be wrestling for 6-7 different organizations, and that'd be no problem for him.
Yeah. And and of course, he patents and you can't you can't use this particular type of name if you go out of the WWF.
Yes.
So he was smart in doing that. Mm-hmm. He was smart in doing that. The only thing is, it's getting a little racy in the language, and I think the sexual aspects of it with too many women and things like that. Hey, I don't want all these women listening and get mad at me. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there's too many.
Yes.
And the days when we had like Sunshine around here, Missy Hyatt, as valets, more people can concentrate on one or two at a time. And I'm often wondering sometimes when I watch that tape if they're not mixed, and it's like a split feeling because there's so many people there. And but in the past, you could concentrate on one or two.
Yeah. Now, I just want to kind of look back at some of your most memorable times, during your wrestling. And I was kind of reading over your website, which I'll make sure we give everybody the address so they can check that out.
Sure.
But I saw in here that you were actually shot at by wrestling fans.
Yes, that had in Louisiana.
Really? What was the deal?
Well, it was one night in Shreveport, and I was wrestling Grizzly Smith. Mm-hmm. And he had me up in a bear hug, and all of a sudden that mystical fire. Everybody says, "Where's that fire at?" I thought, "Oh, it's just a figment of your imagination." But it really hit Grizz pretty bad, and they were waiting for me there at the Old Municipal Auditorium.
Wow.
So the police came back and filed a report. And later on, about 1985, when Duggan was there, I did the same thing to Duggan. I had Kamala with me, and we had the big, as we call the big blow-off match, for all the marbles.
Yeah.
So that day, Jack Curtis, who was promoter down there, asked me, he said, the police want to see you. And I said, uh-oh, what's going on? They said, well, they had 14 death threats on me at the Superdome that night.
Oh, my gosh.
So the police instructed me, said, well, you've got to wear this bulletproof vest or you don't go out. And if anything happens, we'll scrap the whole show. And they literally carried me out there. Luckily, nothing happened, but I mean, it was whoever was calling was very adamant about killing me. So,
wow.
And there's countless times my windows have been bashed out, tires have been slashed. But John, you won't see that in the business anymore.
No,
you won't see that.
Well, there was a passion with the fans then.
It was a tremendous passion with the fans, and right now they're I call them purgatory fans. They're in between. They love the bad guys and they love the good guys.
Yeah. Well, you've also got, the so-called smart fans now, the internet people who know what's going on. Does that kind of hurt? Because, when, for a while, it was kind of the mystique. Is wrestling real? Are these things pre-planned?
Yes.
And now it's pretty much out in the open, hey, we've got these things planned, and I think that just kind of loses a little bit of that passion. Well,
the way it's run today, I would go as far as to say, well, people are correct in what their assumption is. But the way that we protected the business and the way it was, those people could go back and watch those matches, and they'll be the first one grabbing chairs and trying to get in that ring to get after that villain.
Yep.
Believe me, they would, John. It's just a different. And if you had the great Crusher Lazowski, he would agree with you.
Yes.
And Vern Gagne would agree with you. I know everybody knows Vern up around that area.
Do.
And it's just because it's in the past, it's no sign that the business was dead in those days. We did good business. It was just regional. We didn't have a national television, but we had TV in regional areas. This World Class here had 26 shares on Channel 11 for years.
Wow.
That's unheard of.
That is. I mean, even nowadays.
It's a CBS affiliate now, and I was talking with the director the other day, Ken Foote, and he told me, he said, since they even become the CBS affiliate with NFL football and access to air all these super sports, we've never done it.
Really?
Yeah, it was a mighty, mighty thing,
Wow.
26 shares.
Wow.
But as far as the people that are smart and everything, you see that, what I say to these people is, until you put on trunks and you lace those boots up and you step through that squared circle, you make these tough trips that we made, you take all these bumps in this ring, and you fight the people like they used to be. I mean, it was tough getting back to the dressing room. Then you can make the statement and say, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But until you do that, you just don't talk to me about it. And I'm very adamant about that. I don't like that. We wouldn't have that in our days. We never had underground newspapers.
Well, and also, I mean, a lot of guys were
I blame the promoters for it, and I blame some of the guys that got in the business afterward. And I blame them for it. Goodness, I remember when Ric Flair was a rookie. He went to Japan with Dick Murdoch, Dusty Rhodes, and Les Wolfe and myself.
Wow.
Les Wolfe, he came from St. Cloud State Teachers College up there around Minnesota. And I just wondering whatever happened to him. But people like Flair, and they went on to, they were students of the business. Like Ted Dibiase, his father helped me when I got started, and we helped Teddy when he got started.
They're able to get that background. I mean, your history you've got and the knowledge.
Oh, yes.
You're able to teach these guys and not just turn them loose. And
John, I was so fortunate in this business, and I will protect this business until they'll say, well, they buried General Akbar yesterday. But I will always protect this business, and I will always treat it decently because it was good to me. And it's just the thing. Any type of business, you make that what you put into it. And I've seen a lot of guys that had the great potential that would come in and they wouldn't do anything. But you've got to put that forth, that effort. And in the modern times, I would say like Dibiase, Steve Williams, Steve Austin, the Bradshaw kid, Barry Windham. They were students of the business. They learned I remember when Steve Williams was around here at the Sportatorium, he would ask question after question, so he could learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I admire.
There you go. Well, I think a lot of thing too is that a lot of people think, oh well, I'll become a big star, make all this money, and I think that's a misconception too. It takes a lot of paying your dues before some people are even lucky enough.
That's a high misconception, believe me, and especially in the older days. You kicked around for 2 or 3 years before you made you started making ends meet.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, they've got contracts more or less, but even getting into that situation, you're going to have to pay dues.
Yes.
And believe me, John, I respect the people that have paid dues, because I know what it is to do that. And as I've said before, when you go in and get in that squared circle and you put your time in, you get in the car, you go to an airplane, then you fight the traveling aspect of it, and then you got to go to the gym, you got to keep yourself toned up, and then you're ready for the next night. And those days become frequent. I loved it all. We were all making money. But in a sense, it is not an easy business.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an easy business.
Now, I just want to kind of take up here, too.
Sure.
Your fondest memories, of your time.
Well, of course, I'm a native of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
And Lufez and the Assassins, they were the ones actually lubed to get me to come here.
Okay.
And, of course, I was a young kid then, like a teenager. But then I learned the American wrestling. I went through the amateur ranks. And, of course, some of the fondest memories is some of my first matches. And then the climatic parts were the big sellouts. And when I was wrestling, I held the North American title.
Yes,
and I was Austrasian champion over in Australia for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I held numerous tag championships of different states.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just built up to a big climatic thing from my first match on up until I was wrestling in the ring, and then I got out on the floor with Devastation Incorporated, and it's been a wonderful time in my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well,
but those are some of my great memories, and some of the tough matches. There were so many great wrestlers in those days, and there still is. Please don't misunderstand me. It's just that the wrestling aspect of it and the use of how you used to use that ring to your advantage and everything like that is gone. What you see now is 5,000 clotheslines and these power bombs and things like that. There's nothing leading into that.
Yeah.
See, that's what my total disagreement is.
The whole aspect of how they're doing this.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And of course, there were so many great wrestlers that have come and gone. And in the days when I wrestled, when I broke into the business, I would listen and I would watch, and I wouldn't say anything. And that way you start getting the knowledge. And the problem is today, when a young man breaks into the wrestling business, there's not that many places to work anymore. In our days, we had what we call territories, area. You had one up there, and Minnesota Burn had one. They had one here in Dallas. They had one in Amarillo. They had one in Tampa, Charlotte, Atlanta. So they were all booking offices, and you worked 6, 7, maybe 7, 8, maybe times a week, And right now, it's hard for a young man to polish.
But we really thank you for taking the time to chat with us here.
Oh, my pleasure, John.
That'll do it for this week's Under the Ring Report. As always, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, join us on Facebook, on our Facebook group, and we look forward to hearing from you. And join us again next week right here on the Under the Ring Report.
This is General Akbar telling you once again, listen to Under the Ring Report, because you're going to have a lot of superstars.
Follow the Under the Ring Report on Twitter at UTRR Podcast. You can subscribe to the Under the Ring Report on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, or visit undertheringreport.com. Thanks for listening to the Under the Ring Report.